My parents skipped my husband's funeral to attend a birthday party for a cousin they barely even like. And now, 6 months later, they are on their hands and knees begging me for the one thing I swore I would never give them. I want you to listen to this story and tell me honestly, would you ever be able to look at your own flesh and blood again if they treated the love of your life like he was an inconvenience? Am I the villain for turning my back on them when they're at their lowest point? Or did they forfeit their right to be called my family the second they chose a slice of cake and a bouncy house over my husband's casket? I need you to understand that Mark was everything to me. We met in college when I was a nervous wreck, and he was the guy who could make an entire room feel at ease just by walking into it. We were together for 8 years, married for 4, and we were planning on starting a family of our own. My parents, Robert and Diane, always had this weird, passive-aggressive energy toward him. It wasn't that Mark was a bad guy. He was a successful architect, he was kind, and he treated me like a queen. It was just that he wasn't the guy they had picked out for me in their heads. They wanted me to marry the son of one of their country club friends, a guy named Julian who had the personality of a wet paper towel but a trust fund that could move mountains. Because Mark was self-made and didn't worship at the altar of my father's ego, he was always an outsider. They would make little snide comments at Thanksgiving about his car or his modest career goals, but Mark always took it with a smile. He'd squeeze my hand under the table and whisper that as long as we had each other, the rest was just background noise. Then, the unthinkable happened. It was a Tuesday evening, just a normal, boring Tuesday. Mark was driving home from a site visit when a drunk driver blew through a red light at 60 miles per hour. He never even had a chance to hit the brakes. The hospital called me at 7:00 p.m., and by 7:45 p.m., I was standing in a cold, sterile room being told that my husband was gone. My world didn't just crumble, it evaporated. I was 28 years old, and I was a widow. When I called my parents that night, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe, my mother's first response was, "I'm coming over," or "I'm so sorry." It was, "Oh dear, that's going to make the logistics of the family reunion quite difficult, isn't it?" I should have known then. I should have seen the writing on the wall. The week leading up to the funeral was a blur of black dresses, floral arrangements that smelled like death, and a hollow ache in my chest that felt like a physical weight. I kept waiting for my parents to step up. I expected them to help me with the arrangements or at least bring over a meal, but they were strangely distant. Every time I called, they were busy or in the middle of something. 2 days before the service, my dad called me. He didn't ask how I was sleeping or if I was eating. He said, "Listen, Sarah, we realize the funeral is on Saturday. That's the same day as your cousin Chloe's 30th birthday bash. Your Aunt Sarah has been planning this for a year, and it's a black tie event at the vineyard. We've already RSVP'd and paid for the car service." I remember sitting on my kitchen floor, staring at a picture of Mark and feeling the air leave my lungs. I asked him if he was joking. I asked him if he really just equated my husband's funeral to a birthday party for a cousin we see once every 3 years. My dad had the audacity to sigh, like I was being the difficult one, and said, "Mark is gone, Sarah. Showing up to a cemetery isn't going to bring him back, but missing Chloe's milestone birthday will cause a huge rift in the family. We'll come by next week and take you to lunch, okay? We can mourn then." I hung up on him. I didn't yell, I didn't scream. I just felt something inside me snap. I realized in that moment that I wasn't just grieving my husband. I was grieving the parents I thought I had. The day of the funeral was the loneliest day of my life. My friends were there, and Mark's family was incredible, but every time I looked at the empty seats where my parents should have been, I felt a fresh wave of betrayal. While I was throwing a handful of dirt onto the casket of the man I loved, my mother was posting photos on Facebook of her sipping Chardonnay and laughing in a cocktail dress. She even had the nerve to caption one of the photos, "Life is for the living. So glad to celebrate such a beautiful day." I blocked them both that night. I didn't send a long, dramatic text. I didn't give them the satisfaction of knowing they broke me. I just vanished from their lives. I changed my number. I moved out of the house, Mark, and I shared because the memories were too sharp, and I threw myself into my work. I spent 6 months in a dark, quiet place, trying to figure out how to exist in a world without Mark's laughter. And then, the begging started. It began with a letter in the mail, then another, and eventually they tracked down my new address and showed up at my door. My father looked like he had aged 10 years, and my mother was clutching her pearls so hard I thought they'd break. They didn't come to apologize for the funeral, at least not at first. They came because my father's business had hit a massive legal snag, and they were facing total financial ruin. They knew Mark had left me a very substantial life insurance policy and that he had been savvy with his investments. They were literally facing the loss of their home, and they thought I was their golden ticket. So that's the situation I was in. I was sitting there, looking at the people who chose a birthday party over my husband's final goodbye, and they were crying about losing their country club lifestyle. Before I tell you how I handled that confrontation and what I said to them when they asked for the money, I want you to pause right here. Go to the comments and tell me what you would have done. Would you have helped them because they're your parents, or would you have slammed the door in their faces? I really want to know if I'm the only one who thinks some sins are unforgivable. When I finally let them into my living room, I didn't offer them water or a seat. I stood by the fireplace, right next to the urn that holds Mark's ashes. My mother started wailing about how family sticks together and how everyone makes mistakes. My father tried to play the logic card, explaining the temporary cash flow issue and how Mark would have wanted me to save the family legacy. I let them talk for 20 minutes. I let them exhaust every excuse, every fake tear, and every manipulation tactic in the book. When they finally stopped, the silence in the room was deafening. I looked my father dead in the eye and asked him, "How was the cake at Chloe's party?" He blinked, confused, and stumbled over his words, saying it was fine, but that it wasn't relevant. I told him it was the only thing that was relevant. I told them that on the day I needed them most, they decided that a party was more important than my husband's life. I told them that the money Mark left me was meant for our future, for the children we'll never have, and for the life he worked so hard to build for us. Using that money to save their legacy would be a spit in his face. My mother tried to grab my hand, telling me that I was being cruel and vindictive, and that Mark wouldn't want me to be so bitter. That was the breaking point. I told her that she doesn't get to speak for Mark. She lost that right when she chose Chardonnay over his burial. I told them that they weren't my family anymore. I told them that as far as I was concerned, I was an orphan. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and told them that if they ever contacted me again, I would file a restraining order. My father tried to yell, calling me ungrateful and selfish, but I just watched him with a coldness I didn't know I possessed. As they walked down the driveway, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. 6 months later, they lost the house. They're living in a small 2-bedroom apartment now, and most of their friends from the vineyard have disappeared now that the money is gone. My Aunt Sarah tried to call me to shame me for abandoning my parents in their time of need, but I blocked her too. I realized that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when the world is ending. Mark showed up for me every single day he was alive, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life honoring him, not the people who didn't think he was worth an afternoon of their time. I've started a foundation in Mark's name to help young widows find their footing, and using that money for something good has given me a sense of peace I never thought I'd find again. I still miss him every second, but I know I made the right choice. My parents didn't lose their house because of bad luck. They lost their daughter because of bad hearts. It's a hard lesson to learn, but sometimes the people who raised you are the ones you have to walk away from to save yourself. If you've ever had to cut out toxic family members, you know how heavy that decision is, but you also know how light you feel once you finally do it. Life is too short to give your energy to people who only love you when it's convenient for them. Like this video if you were on my side and think I did the right thing by keeping the money and cutting them off. Subscribe for more stories like this where we dive into the messy, dramatic reality of human relationships. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far, or did they get exactly what they deserved? I'll see you all in the next story.